Hey guys, welcome to a weekly question video. On today's question video, I want to answer a question that I received over on Instagram all about how I developed the ability to recognize when I need accountability and how I'm able to ask for it. But before I get into all that, like this video, subscribe if you're not already, leave us a comment. All of those things really do help us out. And if you want to support what we're doing, get bonus content, dive deeper into the topic of domestic discipline, a link to our Patreon is down below. Definitely check it out if you're interested. So I received this message on Instagram that was kind of asking about, in a past podcast where I mentioned recognizing that I needed accountability in a specific situation and being able to go to CODA and express my need for accountability, ask for the accountability that I pretty much deserved in that situation. Not pretty much, I absolutely deserved in that situation. They were asking, how did I get to the point where I could recognize that I needed accountability? And how did I get to the point where I could not only recognize it, but ask for it? I really wanted to take some time to kind of ponder this question because it is a complex question. And it's something that I didn't know. I've been able to think through it and find an answer. But at first I was like, I don't know how that happened because CODA and I have been kind of working on our relationship for so long. It's been such a slowly developing process within me that I can't really pinpoint exactly when that happened. But I think really what it was is that as we grew our relationship, as we developed in our roles, as we grew closer as a couple, I realized that the reason I can recognize when I need accountability is because I feel the severing of the relationship when my behavior does not honor the authority structure and does not honor CODA's authority, his position in the relationship. And I feel the disconnect that happens when I behave inappropriately, when I don't follow the rules, when I'm disobedient, when I'm disrespectful. I feel the disconnect in my relationship, and I desperately want to reconnect. I desperately want that to be fixed. And the fastest, easiest way to fix that within our relationship, because we have the structure, because we've negotiated these things, the easiest way to fix that severing of relationship, to fix that disconnect, is through accountability. It's through discipline. It's through spanking that we can get back to a place of feeling connected, of feeling cohesive in our relationship again. And so when I recognize that my behavior was inappropriate and it caused dissension, it caused disconnect, it caused tension in my relationship, I don't want that disconnect. I don't want that tension to continue to root itself in my relationship. And that is why I go and I ask for the accountability. My ability to ask for accountability and even my ability to recognize the disconnect that happened starts with the relationship between CODA and I. It starts with the fact that we have developed communication, that we have developed closeness, that we have developed a bond through the use of domestic discipline, through just fostering our relationship and growing our relationship and becoming close as a couple. But the reason I can ask, the reason I can go to him is because he holds space to hear me out. And that's the first thing you need in order to not only recognize when you need accountability, but also to ask for it, is you need a head of household that is going to hold space to hear you. I think sometimes head of households can become maybe defensive, maybe even offended over their taken in hand asking for accountability, because maybe they are upset with themselves for not recognizing that their taken in hand behaved inappropriately, or not recognizing that they broke a rule, or not asking the right questions, or, all of these things that maybe they look at as personal failings. And when their taken in hand comes to them and they ask for that accountability, maybe they take it as like, oh, well, she's pointing out where I went wrong. Try not to let yourself go down that path, because most of the time a taken in hand is not coming at you telling you that, like, why didn't you just figure this out for yourself? That's not the energy they're bringing. They really are just trying to self-report that they did not honor the structure of the relationship, and that they want to mend that break, mend that disconnect that happened because of their behavior or because of their disobedience, and that they want the accountability so that they can continue to grow in their submission, so that they can continue to grow closer to you as their head of household, so that they can continue to see your authority being played out in the relationship. Because if she didn't mention anything, then it might make your authority actually look worse if she didn't mention it. And so don't get too caught up in the feelings of failing when your taken in hand needs to express these things to you. So you have to have a head of household that holds space for that conversation, that just lets you express yourself. You also have to be very, very respectful in how you approach this topic, because you can't go in saying, hey, didn't you notice that I didn't follow the rules today? Hey, if you would have checked in, you would have noticed. Or why do you let me talk to you that way? You can't go in with that energy. That is very, very disrespectful. So you have to be appropriate. You have to come to him and you have to say, I feel like I need to bring something to your attention. And I realized as I was assessing my day that these things did not get done. Or, hey, I was really thinking about our discussion earlier, and I see how I was actually pretty disrespectful, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So there are certain ways that you can go about bringing this to your head of household that honors his authority. Now, obviously, every head of household is going to have a different preference of how you approach these things. Maybe the wording, maybe the tone of voice, maybe the way you approach it. And so definitely take those things into consideration, but do not come at them with aggression or blame or anything like that, because that is inappropriate. And the other half of that is that you need to self-assess. Being able to self-assess and self-evaluate is a very, very valuable tool as a taken in hand, because our head of households are not all seeing, they're not all knowing, they are not mind readers, and they are not oracles of perfection. We have to be able to self-assess and bring things to their attention when it's needed. Koda works outside the home, so not only is he not all seeing, he's physically not here many hours of the day. And so he really does rely on me to keep a calendar, to keep track of what I'm doing through the day, to be honest in how I mark things off and what I'm doing and how I'm communicating. He really expects me to bring things to his attention, especially the things that he's not physically here to see. But beyond that, even in conversation, if I can look back and say, I'm just not feeling great about that conversation, let me play it back through in my head. What did I say? How did I act? What was my demeanor? What was my body language? And then to go to him and say, I don't feel like I was very respectful when I did this, or I felt like I could have worded that better, and I felt like it came off disrespectfully, and I really do think I need to be held accountable so I can learn how to do that better next time. Obviously, the decision is still his. I'm not making his decision by saying, I would really like to be held accountable for this. He can still assess and say no. I do think it's detrimental to a taken in hand to hear that their head of household does not take their concerns seriously. So, really weigh the effect that saying no to your taken in hand asking for accountability, really weigh the effect that that will have on your relationship before you decide to say no. Um, because it is within your right to decide. But if she's asking for accountability, it's because she feels guilty. It's because she feels the weight of that. It's because she feels that disconnection. And it's going to be extremely hard to mend those feelings, to rectify the relationship, to build that connection back without accountability. Is it doable? Absolutely. It can be done. But without the immediate accountability of a spanking, it can be such a long process. It can be so tedious. It can be so much harder. And so you really do have the tool to offer a fast path to reconciliation. And if you have that ability, if you can take that burden off of her, if you can rectify her guilt, if you can rebuild connection and reconcile the relationship quickly, why not? That would be my biggest advice, is that if she's asking for it, it's because she really needs it. And you really should just really weigh the effect it's going to have on your relationship if you decide not to. And so that's the other part. So having a head of household that can hold space for that conversation, having self-assessment, also having an understanding of the rules and of the expectations. You can't necessarily self-assess something if you don't know that it's an expectation. You can't feel guilty enough to want that accountability if you don't even know you did anything wrong. So you need to have a really good understanding of the expectations and of the rules. Now that might mean that you need to simplify your rules. That might mean that maybe you need to really think through the pillars of your rules rather than the individual rules themselves. And so if you have a pillar of responsibility and you can self-assess and say, I really feel like that what I did was irresponsible, and I don't know if we have a specific rule to this situation, but I'm going to go to my head of household and I'm going to let them know what happened and that I feel like it's irresponsible for me to have done that. And so I feel like accountability is something that I need because it goes against the pillar. It goes against the overarching expectation in the relationship, right? And for us, it really helps that we have those rules written down. We keep a book in the house, but Coda wanted access to our rules at all times. So I actually typed them up for him so that they are on his phone. And so not only are they on his phone, they're also on my phone because they're in our Google Docs. And so having access to be able to pull up the rules and read through them as I feel necessary, as I want to, just to refresh my memory of what I'm expected to do, that's really helpful. And so having a head of household that can hold the space, self-assessing, understanding the rules, and then having a high standard. Having a high standard, first and foremost, comes from the head of household. The head of household really does set the tone for the relationship and for the home. And so if he's holding a pretty low standard, if he's set the bar pretty low, it's hard as a taken in hand to expect more of yourself when your head of household isn't expecting that same level. And so if you and your head of household have differing levels of expectation, have a conversation, come to some middle ground on that, because you really do need to have high expectations of what obedience looks like. What does respect look like? What does following the rules and standards and expectations of your relationship look like? Is there any gray area that you need to shore up? I don't like things that live in gray areas. I feel like you really do need to have a standard of, you know, pretty much as close to black and white as you can. Of course, there's always going to be extenuating circumstances that may negate the necessity of accountability, but those are so few and far between. And you really do need to make the standards as black and white as possible so that it's either you followed it or you didn't. And if you didn't, it really doesn't matter why. And if you didn't do it, then there's accountability. And that's really is how black and white it needs to be. And you need to set those standards high. You need to have a high level of expectation for yourself from your head of household that says that you are expected to follow the rules. And if you don't, it doesn't matter the circumstances around your misbehavior. If you misbehave, if you don't follow the rules, if you don't show respect, if you don't show obedience, that there will be accountability. And when you have those high expectations, even when your head of household may not have caught it, even if, you know, he doesn't necessarily step in and make that decision right away, if you have matched expectations and they're high expectations, when you go to him and you say, hey, I was self-assessing and I did this, and because there's a high expectation of what obedience looks like, I know I wasn't obedient in that, or I wasn't respectful in that. And if he agrees with where the expectations are, if he agrees with where that standard is, then he has to agree that you're right in your assessment. And then it's a natural flow into, okay, accountability has to happen. And so all that to say, like, you have to have certain elements in place in your relationship for this really to develop and for it to work. Because without a head of household that is like willing to hold space to hear the concerns that they're taken in hand, she can never get to a place of asking for high standards. She can never get to a place of being able to self-report and self-assess. And it's so hard when you are taken in hand and you're self-assessing and you're like, I didn't meet the expectations here, but you don't know where those standards of expectations lie. You don't know how black and white or gray your rules really are. And you don't have a head of household that's really willing to talk through those things. That leads to breakdown in the relationship. That leads to a degradation of the relationship. And so I would say first and foremost, you have to ask your head of household to hold space to hear your concerns. Once you have that, then it can naturally develop where you can then have a conversation about the rules, setting these black and white standards of what is and is not acceptable. And where is that expectation? Like, where's that standard of expectation lie? And how high is that standard? What do we consider to be the threshold of what's acceptable and what isn't? And then once all of that's in place, then you can really start to work on your skills of self-assessing and bringing those things to your head of household. And it is not a bad thing to want accountability. It's not a bad thing to ask for accountability, because only with the accountability are you able to learn and grow and develop, not only in your submission, but as a person, as a taken in hand. You learn to become a better version of yourself, which is the whole point and purpose of this, is to become better. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope that answered that question. Hope you got something out of this. Let me know down below what you think, and we will talk to you next time.